be amazing to me, and how much information and how interactive they have been. So let's keep it up going this afternoon. Our first speaker is Greg Baird. He is a national lecturer on LGBTQ civil rights and equality. He is also a storyteller, writer, and filmmaker. Greg has dedicated following a social media that follows his life for LGBTQ activism and LGBTQ history facts. He is a native of northern Michigan and currently calls Chicago his home. Greg has been an activist and speaker for LGBTQ civil rights for 27 years. His legacy is to help bring communities together to a more accepting place for everyone regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, sex, disability, gender identity, expression, or sexual orientation. So Greg, please join us on the stage.
Well, good afternoon. And I have to tell you, I'm completely thrilled I'm in Southern California coming from Chicago because they just got blasted with snow on Friday. So thank you to the conference for having this here. I want to thank Rudy also for his work in getting me to come and keynote, so I really appreciate it. I come from a point of how our stories and our storytelling connects us, and it changes policy, it changes hearts and minds, but also we grew up with the intention and the knowledge that our differences were a bad thing and our differences should be celebrated. So as a gay man, a proud gay man, and it took a long journey to get that way, and to get here, I'm very happy to be here. I don't want to be rude, but I actually brought my family with me. And the question is, who's the gay boy in the picture? When I first started showing this picture, I warned my mother has passed away, but I told my dad, and my dad's 91, I said, Pop, I'm going to be showing the family photo from like 1968. And talking, he goes, that's okay. And then he came to a lecture and he goes, I was pretty good looking back then, wasn't I? My mother, of course, dressed me, and my gay friends will say, wow, that's a really groovy sweater you got on. Yeah, and I think so too. I'm from a small town. I call Northern Michigan my home, but I come from a small town called Emily City, Michigan. And you know, those of us in Michigan hold our hand up like the mitt to show us where we live. So I grew up in this little area, and my town was called the Gateway to the Thumb. Very attractive to know that you were the gateway to the thumb growing up. My father owned a hardware store. My mother with a Star Trek outfit. She stayed at home, and she was, she did her motherly duties at home and worked and took care of us. And it was a rough time growing up for myself, because what you don't see is I grew up in a family that taught us by conversations and jokes that it was okay to hate. We used to take a Sunday drive. We had a black family move into our hometown, and my dad said, wow, the news story for this week is we had a black family move into Emily City. So on our Sunday drive, we would take the car and we'd go out for a brunch, and then we would drive by that family's house. And the first thing my father would say is, okay, boys, I want you to roll up the window and lock the door. If you tell your children to roll up the window and lock the door, you're creating walls, and you're creating walls of them, and also education that you're telling your kids that those people on the other side of that window are bad. And you should live in fear. And I lived in fear a majority of my life with my dirty little secret that I thought. Also, I was a chubby kid growing up, so I already felt like I had a shot against me. So much the fact that my mother would take the Sears catalog, remember those when we actually had catalogs, take the male model out of the clothing line, cut it out, chop the head off, put it on the refrigerator, and put my head on it and say, that's the kind of kid that I want. So when you have that growing up and you don't know what these feelings are, you can understand what a lot of youth are going through, a lot of LGBT youth. And we need to talk about those communities. And when we talk about peace and inclusion, it's for everybody, not just a chosen few. Thank you. I also felt when I was younger that I was afraid of the bullies, so I became the class clown, and I did that because of the fact that I thought if I made the bullies laugh, they would leave me alone, and they did. One of the unique things about this picture that you don't see, and I'm waiting for the response here, my brother and I are both adopted. We're both adopted from different families. And guess what? My parents hit the homosexual lotto. They have 2 gay kids. And I love telling that story when I'm out speaking at colleges and universities, because usually I get the sociology, psychology students, and they're on their laptops or writing notes. And when I do that, they always go, they can't believe it. Like, what happened? So I'm excited to do this. I show this usually when I go out and speak, and you have the opportunity to do this. So on the count of 3, there's almost 1,000 of you here. On the count of 3, I would like you, in either, whatever your first language is to say, hate has no home here. 1, 2, 3. Wonderful. Hate has no home here, and we're living in a time when there's a lot of hatred going on, a lot of bigotry, and a lot of uneasiness in our world. And I feel it's my mission, and a lot of yours that are here, to create communities in kindness and inclusion. And it's a lot of things that I've never experienced growing up, especially being told I was different and I couldn't be who I was. And it's a long journey. It's a very long journey. As I mentioned earlier, our personal stories changes a lot of policies. It changes a lot of minds and hearts and things like that. And that's why, one of the reasons why you're here. I am so grateful to be here in California with all of you under the mission that we get to share a little bit of our lives with each other and look at each other. And you know what? Put the cell phones away and look at each other. I have such a problem when I'm out with friends or I see students and everybody's posting the latest picture of what you had for breakfast or what was the cooking thing. I'm guilty of that. Or we got to check in everywhere we go. I'm at Burger King and I'm in the drive-thru, So share your stories, look at one another, talk to one another. We may be different, but we're going to have a lot of similarities, and we have a lot of love to share and a lot of kindness. And the great thing is that you're going back, changing those communities because you believe in hope. You believe in love. You believe in peace. And we need it more than ever. More than ever. I just feel like the earth has been hit with a giant stick like it's a bee's nest. And we just don't know what to do. So one of the reasons why we're all here is to make those changes and create that change. What's your legacy? What do you want to leave this earth for people to know what you're doing? I know what mine is, and I'm really proud of it. It's been a long road. I'll be 59 next month, and my legacy, I kind of knew what I wanted to do when I was younger. I just didn't know. And when I grew up in that family, when I was taught a lot of things, and I heard the gay jokes at the dining room table, I heard the Jewish jokes. My father owned a hardware store. He knew all the latest stuff. And I thought it was very inappropriate. And I knew one day things would get better. And they did. So my legacy is to go out and do my little part to help change a lot of hearts and minds and change the world a little bit, and you're doing that as well. And the energy is just incredible to walk in here today and see people participating and talking and really excited about their clubs and different things that they're doing. And I really value that so much. So lastly, I'm doing a breakout session I want to tell you about that's coming up at 3:15, and it's called Disarming Hate and Bigotry. It's a little bit of a slice of a lecture that I do. It's building, accepting, an inclusive community, and I am talking about LGBTQ issues, the latest state of hate and bullying, and what's going on in our country. So if you want to understand a little bit more, I give some examples. I also talk about what some people are doing to make that change in our world. That's going to be beautiful. So the session's at session 8, 3:15 p.m., track D, in the workplace ballroom. Thank you for letting me be here. I appreciate it, and let me show a little slice, and also for letting me bring my family along. I'm sure they're completely thrilled. Thank you so much.
Greg, thank you very much for coming out and talking with us today. And I know with the work that you will continue to do, there will become a day when we don't have all the issues that we have today. Thank you very much.
My goodness. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
All right, our next speaker is Dr. Ira Helfand. He is a member of the International Steering Group and founding partner in the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. The recipient of the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize and co-president of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. He is also a co-founder and past president of the Physicians for Social Responsibility. He has addressed the United Nations and numerous prestigious and influential organizations, and received several awards. In addition to the Nobel Peace Prize, he has published studies on the medical consequences of nuclear war. Dr. Helfand currently practices as an internist and urgent care physician at a family care medical center in Springfield, Massachusetts. Doctor?
Thanks, Kevin. A generation ago, all of us who were living then understood that nuclear weapons posed an existential threat to human survival. Unfortunately, when the Cold War ended, we lost that understanding. We all began to behave as though the danger had gone away. It hadn't. There are still 14,000 nuclear warheads in the world today, and over recent years, conditions have changed, and the danger that these weapons will be used has grown dramatically. So that, for example, today, former Secretary of Defense William Perry says that we are closer to nuclear war than we have ever been, closer than we were during the worst moments of the Cold War. The Scientific Advisory Panel at the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists reset their doomsday clock last year to 2 minutes to midnight, the closest it's ever been. They will be resetting the clock again this coming Thursday, and it is likely they will move it even closer to nuclear apocalypse. But we're not paying attention. People around the world have dropped this issue off their radar screens. Back in the 80s, if you asked people what are the major problems facing the world, preventing nuclear war was number 1 and number 2 on everybody's list. If you ask that question today, it doesn't appear on anybody's list. And that has to change, because otherwise, terrible things are going to happen. I want to talk a little bit today about what a nuclear war would look like, because we've forgotten that also. And it's terribly important that we understand the enormity of the danger that we face. Let me start by describing to you what would happen in a limited nuclear war, as might happen, for example, between India and Pakistan. About 13 years ago, a group of climate scientists looked at this question, and they imagined that India and Pakistan each used 50 Hiroshima-sized bombs against targets in the other country. Now, many of us have images in our mind of what happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the destruction there is a very powerful warning to us of what these weapons can do. But the main thing we need to understand about Hiroshima and Nagasaki is that they do not begin to prepare us for the destruction that will take place if weapons are used today. In the scenario that the climate scientists considered, 100 of these bombs are used, and in a week, 20 million people die. But this local destruction, the fires, the explosions, the radiation, is only a small part of the story, because these 100 explosions start 100 fires and burn 100 cities. And enough soot is thrown into the upper atmosphere to block out the sun and disrupt the climate across the entire planet, cutting agricultural production and triggering a famine across the world that would put up to 2 billion people at risk. Now that was 13 years ago. Just this past September, the same group of scientists updated their study to take into account the dramatic growth in the nuclear arsenals of India and Pakistan, and the growth of the cities that will be burned if these weapons are used. And they are now predicting that a limited war between India and Pakistan that doesn't involve the great nuclear powers would kill 75 to 125 million people in the first week. And the climate disruption would be 3 times greater than that which was previously predicted to put 2 billion people at risk. A war, destruction of this magnitude, would not mean the end of our species, but it would mean the end of civilization as we know it. No civilization in human history has ever withstood a shock of this magnitude, and there's no reason to believe that the very complex and delicate economic system on which we all depend would do any better. This is a limited nuclear war. What happens if the United States and Russia go to war? Let me start by describing what a large-scale attack on a city using modern weapons would look like. Los Angeles would not be hit with a single 15-kiloton bomb as Hiroshima was. It would be hit by 10 or 15 or 20 bombs, each of which would be 30 to 50 times more powerful than the bomb which destroyed Hiroshima. We can conceptualize, we can imagine this destruction using a model of a single 20 megaton explosion. Within 1,000th of a second of the detonation of this bomb, a fireball forms, reaching out for 2 miles in every direction, 4 miles across. Within this area, temperatures reach 20 million degrees, which is hotter than the sun, and everything is vaporized. It simply disappears. The buildings, the trees, the people, the upper level of the earth itself is gone. To a distance of 4 miles in every direction, the explosion generates winds greater than 600 miles per hour and blast pressures greater than 25 pounds per square inch. Mechanical forces of this magnitude destroy anything that human beings can build. To a distance of 6 miles in every direction, the heat is so intense that automobiles melt. And to a distance of 16 miles in every direction, the heat is still so intense that everything flammable burns. Paper, cloth, wood, gasoline, heating oil, it all ignites. Hundreds of thousands of fires, which, over the next half hour, coalesce into a firestorm, 32 miles across, covering over 800 square miles. Within this entire area, the temperatures rise to 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. All of the oxygen is consumed, and every living thing dies. In the case of Los Angeles, we're talking about 6 to 9 million people dead in a half an hour. And if this attack were part of a large-scale war between the United States and Russia, this level of destruction would occur in every major city in both countries, and if NATO were drawn into the conflict, every major city in Canada and Europe. All told, perhaps 200, 300, 400 million people dead in an afternoon. But again, this is only part of the story, because a war of this magnitude puts enough soot into the upper atmosphere to drop temperatures across the planet an average of 8 degrees centigrade. In the interior, that's 14 degrees Fahrenheit. In the interior regions of North America, the temperatures drop 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. We have not seen conditions on this planet like this since the coldest moment of the last ice age, and we would in fact be creating a new man-made nuclear ice age. Under these conditions, all of the ecosystems that have evolved since the end of the last natural ice age would collapse. Food production across the planet would stop. The vast majority of the human race would starve to death. And it is possible that we would become extinct as a species. This is not the plot of a science fiction movie. This is the danger we are living with every day that we allow these weapons to continue to exist. Even if no one in leadership in any of the nuclear armed states ever makes a deliberate decision to launch nuclear war, there is always the possibility of an accident. And we know of at least 6 occasions, actually 7 occasions, during the nuclear weapons era, when either Moscow or Washington actually began the process of launching their nuclear arsenals in the mistaken belief that they were already under attack by the other side. On each of these occasions, we were not saved by the wisdom of our leaders, or the infallibility of our technology, or the soundness of our military doctrine. We were saved, in the words of former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, by luck. We lucked out, he said. It was luck that prevented nuclear war. And I would argue to you that the current policy of all the nuclear armed states is nothing more than a hope for continued good luck. We are living on borrowed time, and we don't know when that time is going to run out. So why talk about this? Because there is something we can do. Nuclear weapons are not a force of nature. It's not like there's some asteroid coming at the planet that we can do nothing about. These are little machines. They're about the size of this podium. We've built them with our own hands, and we know how to take them apart. We've dismantled more than 50,000 of them already, but we just have not had the will to dismantle the rest. And that's where we come in. Fortunately, there is a movement around the world that is building to demand a change, even as we demanded an end to the Cold War arms race back in the 1980s and succeeded. To demand now that these weapons be eliminated altogether so this terrible destruction will not come to pass. Most of the time when I talk to audiences, the response I get is that people feel a bit overwhelmed. It's a horrible problem. It's an enormous problem. What can I as a single individual do, they ask. We in Rotary are not in that situation. We belong to a worldwide family with 1,200,000 members. We can act not as individuals, but as part of this wonderful network, this great sisterhood and brotherhood that spans the entire globe. And so we have a special responsibility to do something. Internationally, nations and civil society have come together and negotiated the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which will ban outright the possession of these weapons, not simply their use, but even possessing them. That treaty was voted for at the United Nations, with which Rotary has a long and strong partnership. It was voted on 122 to 1. 74 nations have signed the treaty so far, and 34 have ratified it. When 50 nations ratify the treaty, it enters into force and becomes international law, and the possession of nuclear weapons will be an offense under international law. Here in the United States, we've launched a parallel campaign called Back from the Brink, which is designed to bring about the fundamental change in U.S. nuclear policy that will enable the United States and the other nuclear armed states to join in this treaty and eliminate their weapons. The most important aspect of this Back from the Brink platform of policy suggestions is the desire, the request that the United States enter now into negotiations with all 8 other nuclear armed states for a verifiable, enforceable, time-bound agreement to eliminate their arsenals. These negotiations could begin as soon as the leadership of this country or one of the other nuclear weapons countries decides to exercise leadership and begin this process. And we are calling on constituencies across the country to join in this effort. So far, over 350 organizations, including a number of Rotary clubs, have endorsed this approach, as have the city councils of Los Angeles, Baltimore, Washington, Chicago, Portland, Oregon, Tucson, Salt Lake City, Honolulu, and many others. It's also been endorsed by the state legislature here in California and in Oregon, by the state Senate in Maine, by the state assembly in New Jersey, and there are similar resolutions before many other state legislatures. There are some in Rotary who have argued that this is not something that Rotary as an organization can do, that it's too political. I would urge them to reconsider that position. Advocating the abolition of nuclear weapons is political in the broadest sense. We're asking for change in policy. But when we advocated for the mass vaccination of children against polio, we also were advocating for policy changes in many countries. And it was not uncontroversial. There were many people who thought vaccination was not a good idea. And in fact, Rotarians who have carried out this work in some countries have come under physical attack. But that didn't stop us from doing something which we knew we had to do to protect the children of the world against polio. It's time for us to stand up now and address an even greater threat to the children of the world, and that's the threat of nuclear annihilation. There are things that we can do right now. Rotarians have come together in a group called Rotarians for a Nuclear Ban. People from that group are here at the meeting, and at the end of this session, we'll be standing at the doors with petitions that you can sign that were circulated by the Hibakusha, the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, calling for the abolition of nuclear weapons. We can also approach our clubs and ask them to get involved as clubs and take this up to the district level and ultimately to Rotary International. It is an essential task and one which we should address. One of the great things about Rotary is that it brings together people from many different cultures and traditions. I was raised in the Jewish faith, and in the Hebrew Bible it says that God said, "Behold, I have set before you life and death. Therefore choose life that you might live and that your children might live." That is literally the choice before us today. And so we need to be sure that we choose wisely and that we act with courage and with determination. Undertaking this quest is a great burden when you know that the world is at risk and that you have to play a role in preventing its destruction. It weighs on you. This is a terrible burden to carry around. And all of us share that burden because we all know this information. But I think we should view this perhaps also as something of a gift. We all joined Rotary because we wanted to give to our communities. We wanted to put service before self. We have been given the opportunity to save the world, and there is no greater service that we can ever do. So let us accept this challenge. Let us, as Rotarians, raise our voice in the cause to eliminate nuclear weapons, and let us together help to save the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Helfand. I believe that he's correct, that we all have a role, and we all need to continue our work in helping him get rid of all the nuclear weapons in the world.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you very much. Appreciate. Our next speaker, Dr. Frederick Luskin, founded and currently serves as director of the Stanford University Forgiveness Projects. At Stanford, Dr. Luskin teaches classes on positive psychology, the art of science and meditation, forgiveness, wellness, flourishing in the psychology of storytelling to undergraduate and graduate students. Dr. Luskin is the author of several best-selling books. His book, Forgive for Good, is best-selling self-help book published on the topic of forgiveness. Dr. Luskin's forgiveness work has been applied in veterans hospitals, churches, in resolving legal disputes, cancer patients. He has helped people recover from violence internationally in Northern Ireland, Sierra Leone, and Arctic Canada. Please welcome Dr. Frederick Luskin.
Wow. Well, hi. I was listening to like the first two talks and thinking, like, this is really hard to do, to get human beings to be kinder people, to work with it, to accept people's differences, to include the other, to not want to destroy each other, to like just to put some of our kind of amazing intellect towards goodwill. You know, I run something called the Stanford University Forgiveness Project, and you know, that started because I was really desperately hurt at a time in my life, and I didn't know what to do. And I did the normal human solution. I got pissed off, I felt sorry for myself, and I turned the experience that had hurt me into my enemy. And so I took the predominant human response to injury or loss or challenge and made an enemy out of what it was that I had thought that had harmed me. And thereby, because of that, I justified for quite a while my lack of peace, my willingness to sow discord and harm literally everywhere I went. I paid that unkindness forward. I demonized the person that harmed me. I reacted in a way where I took a life experience and I made it worse for literally everybody. And it was only I'm going to say, an unpleasant moment where my wife came to me a couple of years after that and said, "Fred, I still love you. I just don't like you as much." And we hadn't been married long enough for me to tune her out. You know, it's like, I'm just being truthful. Like, you know, we were still like, you know, oh, you think that? Wow, I got to pay attention. But what she said was so like devastating to me, in particular because she was such a kind-hearted human being, but it was just true. I was a less likable person because I didn't handle my wounding with any dignity or goodwill. And her comment pushed me to think of what to do. And ironically and even embarrassingly enough, this was quite a while ago, I think I had just passed like my licensing exam to be a therapist, which is, it's not that encouraging. Unfortunately now, and this is like even sadder, in our forgiveness project, we get a lot of therapeutic failures of people who have been encouraged by therapists to speak their anger and hostility and self-pity and not transmute it. And so I took what worked for me. I mean, I couldn't carry my wife around everywhere in the United States, but I took some of the principles that I had gotten, and I started to research forgiveness. Nobody's doing that now. 20-something years ago, there was less than nobody doing it. And we came up with some remarkably findings. That if you forgive, like, you have better physical health and you have better emotional health and your relationships improve. I mean, like, major duh. But we also saw something deeper than that. I mean, really deeper. That the way people justify their unkindness to others is they mull over the ways that the world has been unkind to them. And so they use their wounding as justification for them wounding forward. And if you take a look, you see that everywhere. Partners in marriage do that, families do that, cultures do that, Republicans and Democrats do that. I mean, it's just what we, as people who don't really believe in peace, that's what we do. When we were starting this project, it's so challenging to get at the human desire to be right and the human desire to punish. And one of the things that helped us do this was an ironic, like, offhand comment from Ram Dass. Back in the 60s, he would go to peace marches and comment about he saw so many angry people marching for peace. And that's it right there. You know, I'm angry because you weren't kind. I'm angry because you lied. I'm angry because you cheated. Whatever I'm angry about. And we fool ourselves to thinking that we're interested in peace or goodness or whatever it is when we're angry. And this is not me minimizing the importance of anger. It's an essential protective experience. But when it calcifies in, or when it becomes a habit, it no longer has any positive use. It's a galvanizing to action. So we started to teach forgiveness. I mean, we did a couple of research projects, and we recognized, along with a couple of other academic types, that you can teach forgiveness, you can measure it, it's helpful, people feel better, people's laundry comes out cleaner. I mean, it does good stuff. And we even took it to pretty horrible places on the planet. We have done a couple of small projects in Northern Ireland with Catholics and Protestants. We've done some projects in Sierra Leone with people harmed by their civil war. I'm in the middle of some work in Colombia as a post-conflict thing. We did some training for people after the attacks on 9/11. But that's, to me, the trivial in forgiveness, the big identifiable stuff. The real heart of forgiveness is as a prelude or a passage to kindness in the people who are close to you. You know, that's where forgiveness is so essential, and that's the discomfort that human beings constantly cause in their worlds is by fighting everybody. And like, as we're doing in the United States, just aligning into tribal things and fighting each other. But the real importance of forgiveness is a kind of day-to-day decision that I actually believe to some degree in keeping peace and spreading peace and trying to use my time on this planet to be reasonably good-hearted. Well, it's hard to do that if you get pissed off in traffic all the time. Or if you have these ongoing battles with your life partner. Or you're nasty if somebody gives you bad service. Or people disagree with you politically. These are all recipes for a lack of peace and a lack of forgiveness. And I mean, I know from my own experience, having done this for a long time and been, interviewed by media all over the place, people are attracted to big disasters and big conflicts. But they rarely want to go home and look at the conflicts that they're creating in their own home by holding on to grudges. Because that's the forgiveness that's really hard, and that's the forgiveness that really matters, and that's the forgiveness that sends like foundational tones out, is that it's what I'm doing. Who am I offending or hurting or not giving a break or not honoring, or how is it that my psychological wounding, like how is it that I use that? And that's hard stuff. I mean, none of this creating peace stuff is easy, because it's not just about them out there or the people who are not like us or don't think like we do. It's about our own willingness to, one, look at our intentions and values, and two, work on ourselves, and three, also recognize that for whatever reason in this nutty planet, people hurt each other all over the place. And we do the same. We hurt people by omission and commission. And the forgiveness piece is some degree of web. And it has to be practiced. So I'm going to stop in a moment, but I remember when we were asked all the time by media people, like, okay, so we can't solve the Israeli-Palestinian crisis, probably true, but like, what's a nice practice you could do for forgiveness? So I would say, well, okay, the next time in your shower, think of somebody that you tend to have a grudge with, and deliberately just let it go. In practice, just let it go. Remind yourself, not only don't I need this, but this isn't the contribution that I want to make to the world's energy field. This ain't it. And then another practice is choose one grudge that you have against somebody close and important to you. And let that go. Just practice letting it go. Just as a practice. And the last simple practice is just rehearse. If you don't know how to do it, practice. In your shower, so nobody gets to hear how nutty you are. I'm sorry, I forgive you. It's okay, you didn't mean it. Practice. Because the bias of our mind is to practice negativity and to practice what's wrong. And the antidote, one of the antidotes besides practicing what's right, is practicing letting that part of your mind stop. Stop its daily practice. So we, somehow we do this tiny little corner of the world as our own little small contribution to peace. And I thank you for listening.
Clock. So, Dr. Luskin, please forgive me, okay?
I'll do my best.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right. Our next speaker, Michelle Brooks, is Chief of Staff for the Peace Corps. Her prior positions include work in global health and neglected tropical diseases, serving as head of the U.S. policy and advocacy for Uniting to Combat Neglected Tropical Diseases Support Center, and as the policy director for the Global Network for Neglected Tropical Diseases from 2002 to 2009. Michelle served as the Peace Corps Deputy Chief of Staff and as Director and Deputy Director of Congressional Relations. Please welcome to the stage Michelle Brooks.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and we had a nice acronym for neglected tropical diseases. We called them NTDs because it's a mouthful to always say. Anyway, it's wonderful to be here. I first want to acknowledge past Director, Governor, and Conference Chair Rudy Westervelt for the invitation to join this afternoon, and I'm so pleased to be able to participate and share with you what our over 7,000 Peace Corps volunteers are doing around the world every day, and what we're doing together with Rotary International in communities abroad. Yet before I begin, I want to take a moment, first of all, to recognize how many Return Peace Corps volunteers, or RPCVs, are here in the audience. If you are an RPCV, could you stand for a moment? Are there some? Great. That's wonderful. Yeah, we love it when we see that. And then how many of you have a family member or friend that's a Return Peace Corps volunteer? Are there any out there? Yeah? Show of hands? Great. That's wonderful. And then how many of you may have had a high school teacher or a college professor that was a Return Peace Corps volunteer? Yeah, there's quite a ripple effect when you serve in the Peace Corps, which is terrific. As mentioned in the introduction, I worked in the field of global health for 8 years with 2 different grant recipients from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I know of the work of Rotary in your efforts to eradicate polio. You all can be very proud of what your organization has accomplished to date. And I'm hoping with, I know, each one of you that we'll see the end of this terrible disease very soon. Rotary International is one of our favorite partnerships, and today I will share with you a bit more about the Peace Corps and what we do together, and how you can become more engaged with our shared mission of promoting world peace and friendship. I had the pleasure this morning of going over to the Interact 2020 conference, Peace Conference, and I asked some of the students there, what did world peace and friendship mean to them in 3 words or less? And I thought I would share with you just a few of their comments. Unified, a friendly society, embracing our differences, end world suffering, passion, kindness, selflessness, fun, generosity, and mutual agreement, unity, love, and hope, and of course, service above self. So I thought those were great ways to express what world peace and friendship meant to them. We'll start with the first slide here. So here are some of the basics. I'm just going to run through these slides quickly about the Peace Corps. You have to be a U.S. citizen and at least 18 years of age. And to date, we have more than 240,000 Return Peace Corps volunteers who have served around the globe. We are in 61 countries, and we have been, our country count has continued to grow. We'll actually be reopening the country of Sri Lanka and Kenya later this year, and I will be traveling to Montenegro to swear in a new group of volunteers in April. The average age of our volunteers is 26, yet 3.4% of our volunteers are 50 plus. So that means there's a lot of opportunity out there. Never too late to serve, so if serving as a volunteer is on your bucket list, I would encourage you to take advantage of that. The slide now is showing where we serve. We're in Africa, it's still our largest area, Latin America, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia, Pacific Islands, and Caribbean. Our volunteer program, our 2-year program, is for 27 months, and that includes 10 to 12 weeks of pre-service training. And then we also have a Peace Corps response program, and that is for 3 to 12 months. These are shorter-term assignments that are usually more technically focused, and the average age of that program is 44. If you might be interested in exploring Peace Corps response, you can go to the Peace Corps website, punch in Peace Corps response, and that gives up an overview of some of the current jobs that we have available. For any of you with a medical or health background, we've also opened a new program called Advancing Health Professionals, or AHP, and these listings are also available on our website. Our volunteers work in 6 main focus areas, and they dovetail very nicely with the areas that Rotary is involved. So our DNA is really very much intertwined. As you can see, we are in health, education, youth development, agriculture, community and economic development, and the environment. And over the past, in 2018, we have had some tremendous impact with our volunteers in the education sector. They have reached 250,000 students in 48 countries. We've created 1,000 libraries with our host country partners, and 160,000 people have received comprehensive HIV prevention interventions, including HIV testing referrals. We've also had 20,000 smallholder farmers who were assisted by agriculture volunteers to diversify crops and improve yields. The Peace Corps mission was founded, as many of you know, by President John F. Kennedy in 1961. We aim to promote world peace and friendship through fulfilling 3 goals, and that's to help people of interested countries to meet their need for trained men and women, to help promote a better understanding of Americans on a part of the people served, and to help promote a better understanding of other people on the part of Americans. Our approach to peace is by serving others. Service, which many of you know firsthand as Rotarians, brings about transformation, not only in the lives of those who we serve, but also in our own lives as well. As our volunteers serve in communities, they build local capacity, working in partnership with their communities to define and address their critical needs. Peace Corps volunteers do not come to communities with their own ideas of what people need, but rather work with the host governments, the ministries, and the local community to determine what works best and what would be needed most. So we aren't sitting here trying to impose the values or ideas that we may have, but really having it build up from within the community. Volunteers are placed with local counterparts. They share their culture and what it means to be an American. They undergo extensive language and cross-cultural training, and they're embedded in their communities for 2 years of service. And when volunteers return from the field, they bring back tremendous skills and experiences, such an ability to collaborate, negotiate, lead a team, and engage cross-culturally, skills that can be readily applied to today's workforce and positively impact the United States and other communities abroad. The Peace Corps is also empowering women and women serving as peace builders. So I was very pleased to see that this year's conference, the International Peace Conference, had a track devoted to empowering women. The Peace Corps believes that the empowerment of women is a critical component to creating lasting peace and stability throughout the world. In fact, when the Peace Corps was established in 1961, enacting legislation actually included the Peace Corps had a note that women were a pillar of development, recognizing that expanding opportunities for women can transform their futures and the futures of their families. The Peace Corps is delighted to be a part of the administration's whole-of-government effort to empower over 50 million women economically by 2025 through its Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative, or WGDP. And we have the slide is hard to read, but we do have some more information about it on our website. This initiative was launched in February 2019. Since the launch, the Peace Corps is pleased to announce that the WGD projects are in all of our posts, and 63% of Peace Corps volunteers are working on activities that directly impact this endeavor. For example, volunteers are teaching women in their villages entrepreneurial skills. Excuse me. That are enabling families to earn a modest income, allowing them to send children to school. They are training women about rabbit husbandry or beekeeping and how to create investment and small business. I would like to share one quick story right now about the Budela Women's Group in Mali and Ella. Now, excuse me, I'm not feeling well. I'm gonna have to sit down, I apologize. I'm sorry.
Is there any Peace Corps volunteers that could come up to the stage and maybe give a few words? No, I'm not kidding. Thank you. That's right, you're one of those, aren't you? Sheila Steinberg from Irvine Rotary Club. Hi there.
Hello, I'm Jessica.
Jessica, would you maybe just...
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Vandervoort de Montiel. I am a recruiter for Peace Corps, and I'm based out of Kansas City, Missouri. For me, my Peace Corps opportunity ended up being more than just 2 years of service. I ended up spending over 7 years in Guatemala, and all of that time was dedicated to Peace Corps and the Guatemalan community that I learned to love so dearly. I was a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years in the youth and development sector. I worked with young people and preparing for life after Peace Corps, or after middle school and high school. Less than 1% of the population of young people in Guatemala actually go to college. So we knew it was really, really important to reach young people before they reached prime reproductive age, to be able to be prepared for, how to delay pregnancy or starting their families until they had completed their education. We know that young people that further their education have more opportunities to have a healthy family and to be able to be economically independent of others. I also served as a program and training specialist for the Youth and Development Program, which is a wonderful opportunity to grow the Peace Corps program in Guatemala. So that was my experience in overseas. I've been a recruiter for almost a year and a half, and I am happy to talk to any of you who are interested in serving in Peace Corps. We also work with with Rotaract groups around the country. And so if you're interested in having a return Peace Corps volunteer or a recruiter, chat with one of us and we'll get you connected. We'd love to connect with those Rotaract folks as well so that when they are done with college, they have an opportunity to serve the United States and the countries that they will be working in. Thank you so much.
So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Sheila Steinberg, and I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer also from Guatemala. I served in the forestry program. I was in Guatemala from 1991 to 1993. Now, I was kind of a unique Peace Corps volunteer. I went in after getting my master's degree from the forestry department at UC Berkeley. And at that point, I went and talked to my major professor and I told her, I'm a little bit burnt out on school. What do you think I should do? I want to go help people. She goes, well, why don't you go in the Peace Corps for 2 years and, actually put some of your skills to use. So I did. And I think the biggest lesson that I took away from that is something that got mentioned by the director's talk she just gave a few minutes ago, which is when you go into Peace Corps, you get a lot of training. I came in with a master's degree in forestry. But what you really do is you learn from the community members more than what you give. So we go there as like, oh, we're experts, but what you really learn is how to integrate, how to harness local people's passion, how to realize that just because we live in a first world nation, we don't know anything more than the people who might be in more of a developing country. So to me, it was really some great lessons about community, empowerment of women. I helped plant trees. I got really sick in the Peace Corps. I got asthma and had to be medevaced out. I got on medication, went back and had to teach at a university, and I'm a professor today, so I think it really impacted my life. I'm also president of my Irvine Rotary Club, so it's great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sala, and I was in the Peace Corps in Ghana for 2 years as an almost elder. And so I agree with everything that she said, and I think that it taught me how to collaborate with people, not as a person bringing a solution, but having each of us learn what the other one knows, respecting that. And not only that, but respecting their culture and how they have fun and their music. I would definitely agree that I did some service, but I received so much back in return. And I go back to Ghana every 2 years, and I joined Rotary so I can do projects there with people that I knew in Ghana. So Rotary and the Peace Corps are very connected and can work together very well. I'm grateful.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kerry Carmichael. I am a returned Peace Corps volunteer from Ecuador. I am currently a Peace Corps recruiter as well in the San Francisco Bay Area. Very, very happy to be here and to be part of a service-minded community. So we really do have a lot of connections, so we're very, very happy to be here. I just wanted to say that we do have a Peace Corps booth in the exhibit hall if you haven't been there. Lots of information to give you. We're really extremely interested in the plus 50 community. I am plus 50 now. I didn't serve when I was plus 50, but I think the older Americans, seasoned Americans, I like to say, really have a lot to give to communities. A lot of life experience, and so I really encourage folks to think about that opportunity with Peace Corps. Thanks so much.
Got it on? So how are we doing over there? Is she doing okay? Did we get a thumbs up or? Okay. So we're doing okay. Thank you very much, Michelle, for coming up and sticking it out as long as you did, but we really, truly appreciate the work that you did with the interactors this morning. Thank you very much. So we're at the end of session number 5. The breakout sessions begin at 2:10, and I would like to invite you all to go to the House of Friendship and visit with our vendors in there. And the next session in here begins at 4:20 so that you don't get any more fines to pay. Please be on time. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.